Good evening, everyone. If you ride the subways, tonight's news is not so good. Subway crime has hit an all-time high, according to the transit police.
Well, how bad is crime on the subways? Today, police say the robbers were getting robbed.
How do you feel when you come into the subways?
A little apprehensive, a little afraid. You wonder whether you're going to come back out the same way that you went down.
Okay, so clearly this is from a different decade, right? And as you might have guessed, it's not even from Canada. This is New York City in the 1980s. But it doesn't sound a whole lot different from what we've been dealing with here in Toronto over the last several weeks and months.
Police in Toronto are investigating another violent assault on the city's transit system. This time, a woman in her 20s was stabbed multiple times by another woman on a streetcar.
The suspect, a woman in her 40s, was arrested on scene and charged with aggravated assault.
Toronto police are investigating another swarming event in the city. About 10 to 15 young people attacked 2 transit workers on a bus.
More violence on the TTC. This time, a bus driver is shot with a BB gun.
One woman is dead and another hospitalized after they were stabbed at a High Park subway station.
A woman is in hospital in critical condition tonight after being lit on fire on a Toronto transit bus.
Okay, now you might have had one of 2 reactions to those clips. Either something like, boy, that's really terrifying, or maybe it's more like, come on, stop fear-mongering, guys. Like, these are just one-off incidents, right? Well, let me tell you something. So I do take the subway every single day, and you know, I take it to work. I ride in the morning, I ride in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening, sometimes past midnight, late at night. And I will say, generally, I do feel pretty safe. You know, like sometimes you see things on the subway, but I don't generally worry for my safety. But clearly, my experience is different, right, from everybody else's experience. And hell, I mean, where we're at right now, this is Kipling Station, and it was on one of these buses at the station that a woman was literally set on fire. And this was in broad daylight on a Friday at lunchtime.
Your commuters in Toronto have been set on fire, stabbed, and swarmed in a growing wave of violence, and our transit operators are scared to go to work.
I assure my colleague and all members in this House that this government is paying attention to the situation in Toronto.
And this rash of violence lately on transit has led to police putting more officers on the network, more boots on the ground. So on today's show, we're asking the question, does public transit really need more police officers?
Please stand clear of the doors.
Train service is holding westbound at Rugby Station. Due to emergency alarm activated on board the train.
So I don't know if you just heard that. They just announced that an alarm's been pulled. There's a delay on one of these passenger trains, and emergency personnel have been dispatched. I don't know what's happened, but it's not an unusual occurrence on the TTC.
Our plan aims to have upwards of 80 police officers in place throughout the city's transit locations every day. These deployments will focus on reducing victimization, preventing crimes of opportunity, and enhancing public safety.
So it was literally just the other day at the station that I get out at every day that I saw this pretty scary tweet from Toronto Police. Union Station, 8:05 a.m., fight between 2 parties, reports of person with knife, unknown injuries, police on scene, TTC advised, Toronto paramedics assessing injuries. Like, this is a Union Station. Like, I'm literally here every single day. That's pretty scary.
We also have to be responsive to the recent events we have seen and to do whatever we can to ensure that people not only are safe, but feel safe as well.
When you're on public transit, so whether it's a bus, whether it's a subway, whatever, like, how do you feel generally, from a security and safety standpoint?
I mean, I'm not usually taking transit. I don't usually do it all the time, but like when I am, especially like the recent things that have been happening, it's a little scary, but like, I always try to travel in a group or at least with like one other person just to like make sure I'm safe, but it is a little scary now.
I often see people who seem to be in distress and sometimes shouting and having some challenges.
There was one time even last March that a woman was actually assaulted right in front of me, pushed down, cracked her head, knocked unconscious, and I had to search everywhere for a solid 10 minutes before I could even find a security officer.
Even my friend today was texting me saying that they feel so unsafe, and like I was telling them, oh, I could ride with them.
Like people yelling and saw people do weird things, yeah.
Everyone has seen odd things happen on the TTC where you feel uncomfortable, you stand up, you move, you get off at a stop a little early.
Now, every month, the Transit Commission's CEO submits a report, which is essentially kind of like a by-the-numbers summary of everything that happened across the transit network that month. So, you know, taking thousands of buses and streetcars and subway trains, 1 million plus rides per day into account. And we've got that report. Now, the crazy thing is when you start diving into the crime statistics over the last 5 years, and they sort of break it down according to offenses against customers and offenses against employees. So pre-pandemic, when you look at offenses against customers, they had it down to less than 1 per million boardings, which sounds pretty good. But then the pandemic hit, and even though ridership plummeted, that rate tripled. Then when it comes to offenses against employees, well, they say, according to the report, that there were 4 offenses against employees per 100 employees. That was 5 years ago. Compare that to today, where it's almost 7. Now, hopefully what you got from all of those numbers isn't that taking public transit in Toronto is some kind of lawless hellscape, because, you know, far from it, it's not. There are hundreds of millions of rides that happen every single year on this network. And truth be told, I mean, the vast majority of them go by without incident, and taking public transit is actually usually kind of boring. But consider this. Just before Christmas, the transit union said that more than 70% of its employees have experienced violence on the transit network, and more than 50% have been harassed while on the job. And, you know, like, we haven't even talked about all those crimes that go by unreported, because truth be told, if you're in a tense, potentially dangerous situation, not everybody's first instinct is going to be to bring a whole train to a stop and call for help.
You don't want to be the center of attention. You want to be able to slip through, make whatever situation is happening go away quietly. You don't want to have more attention drawn to yourself. And you know, that's a really public thing to do, is pull that alarm, and suddenly everybody's eyes are on you. And what if you're wrong?
Hey, Katie, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing, Andrew?
Good, good. Katie Nicholson here, who's an investigative journalist with CBC. And Katie, you've been riding the subway, the streetcars, the buses an awful lot.
This feels like my second home right now, yeah.
In a way, right? Because what was it that you were trying to figure out, and how did you go about doing it exactly?
I've been reporting on a lot of the incidents that have happened on TTC, and what I really wanted to capture was what it is riders are feeling, and in the moment when an incident happens. I'm a rider, I take TTC frequently, and I've experienced a number of things, and I started to even keep my own log of things that happened.
And so, what did you see?
Well, you know, it's funny. It changed with the times and with the traffic flows and how many people were on board and how many people weren't. But early in the afternoon, it didn't take long for something to happen. A man got on board who started singing really loud to himself, just made up songs.
I put a Ness's ass out of 300.
I think many people might consider it off color or inappropriate. It started to make some people uncomfortable. They started to look back. And then he started to have sort of a full-fledged argument with the seat opposite to him, which was empty.
Whoever Julian Assange was sending in to get those files, that was solid as snake, bro.
And I think that was the point where people really started to get uncomfortable. And we actually saw a woman get up that I was standing next to, and she sort of shifted and moved to another part of the streetcar. So what I did is I sort of followed her afterwards, just to sort of get her thoughts about why did she move, how she felt in that moment, and how often she sort of encounters situations like this. And she said, it's every day.
part? I often do that, yeah. I don't want to engage. I'm not equipped to do that. I feel bad for them, I really do. As I say, I think there should be more supports. I don't think it's a matter of more police.
What do you think would work? Is there a model that you think might work?
I don't know enough about it. I just know there aren't enough supports in the city, and especially with COVID. So people, if they have special needs, if they don't have a place to stay, there's no place to go, there's no shelter, there's no one to talk to. So they stay warm on the streetcars, I get it.
What else did you see on the network?
Well, as we hit rush hour, we saw a lot of the people who were maybe unhoused or in need of support. They started to feel uncomfortable and they got off as more of the daily commuters got on. But then once rush hour was over, we started to see more people who maybe were in need of other services or were getting on just because they had nowhere else to go. They started to come back on board. And with that group of people, there was a fairly aggressive guy who got on at the back of one of the streetcars, and we saw him repeatedly go up to people and try to engage in a fight, saying, "Do you want to fight me?" And
actually trying to pick a fight.
Yeah, trying to pick a fight. He's sort of darting around, looking around, just really agitated, really angry. And he approached a young group of 4 people. They finally got up and sort of disengaged themselves very graciously and moved. And then I got off and I sort of chatted with them as well about how often they encounter this. And what's really interesting is they told me they have to or have learned to become experts in de-escalation just by taking TTC every day. It's something that a commuter now has to be able to do.
This is part of the skill set of navigating the city on public transit.
Yeah.
So when you did speak with those people, did you ask them about how they felt about the plan to have 80 or so additional police officers on the network every day to try to prevent this from happening and to try to be a visible presence?
Yeah, overwhelmingly what we heard is police are not the answer.
I have thought about it, and I really think that, with just cutting, slashing the budgets for social services, it just leads to, people see, what's going on the TTC right now, and they kind of just see it as that this is the problem, when in reality, this is just a byproduct of a larger problem.
And I'm just thinking about, like a day like today, it's freezing outside, and it's freezing on the platforms. Here it's warm, and I can't help but think that this must be home, in a way, for a lot of people who are struggling.
Yeah, and you see sort of a wider picture of the social safety net failing when you come down here on days like this. We rode the subway for many hours and saw so many people who were unsheltered, who were coming here just to sleep. It's a warm, safe place for them. People who rode it from end to end and just to stay warm down here. And this is where people are coming because there is, in the city, nowhere else for them right now to go. And we saw it too at night. A young woman who was in distress just sort of basically collapsed on a bus in front of us when we were riding. And it's kind of the same thing. This has become, in essence, a mobile shelter throughout the system.
Katie, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So there are 75 subway stations across 4 different lines, and each station is open for about 20 hours a day. Just how effectively can 80 police officers cover that much ground? Hey, welcome back to About That. We are talking about the recent spike in violence on Toronto's public transit network and the police plan to have more than 80 additional officers patrolling that network each and every day, and whether that's something the TTC, the Transit Commission, actually needs. Now, police almost never divulge operational details, so knowing exactly when and where those officers will be deployed, that's very much internal information. And to be fair, it's very dynamic information. That literally changes from day to day. But there is a part of gauging how effective this plan will be that actually kind of comes down to a pretty simple math calculation. So there are 75 subway stations across 4 different lines, and each station is open for about 20 hours a day. Now, 80 additional officers, let's say you put 1 additional officer at each station, which you wouldn't really do because officers tend to work in pairs, but let's just go with it. Even then, they couldn't keep watch all day unless they just don't sleep. You'd need hundreds of officers to cover that much ground. And we haven't even talked about the buses, right? There are thousands of buses driving across thousands of kilometers of road. Just how effectively can 80 additional officers cover all of that ground? I mean, it's a pretty big network, right? And there are a lot of people who need protecting.
We must also ensure that our city's transit workers, who perform a vital service for all of us, are able to come to work each and every day, knowing that they will have a safe working environment and that the police will work collaboratively with the TTC Special Constables to ensure this is the case. I also want, as Chief of Police, to remind people that we live in a safe city.
Okay, so I'm heading into the office right now of Marvin Alfred, who is a local union leader, and I'm going to ask him about whether he and other transit employees think adding more police to the transit network will help solve the problem. Let's go. Marvin, hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Can I just jump right out and ask you, like how bad is it on the transit network right now from the perspective of an employee?
It's not great right now. People are suffering, not just physically, emotionally. That the system, the reliability of the system, the whole notion of transit worker safety, transit rider safety needs to be addressed. Transit workers are suffering right now.
As I was walking, somebody knocked me over from the back, reached into my pocket and took my cell phone, which I was not using. Every time I close my eyes, I imagine that. At night I'm having nightmares and I'm so scared to go out of my bus.
In the system right now, they don't necessarily feel that they've got the respect and support in order to feel that they can be, supported doing their jobs.
So let's get right to the proposed solution then, one of them anyway.
Our officers will be on, in, and around the transit system across the city, throughout the day and late into the evening, each and every day.
How much can 80 additional police officers on the network accomplish?
I think that's a short-term solution. Right now, having that kind of injection of enforcement, it's an asset to have people there to help deter crime happening. But I think that shows that it has not been addressed properly for the longest period of time. And now they'll do a spike of an awareness, of enforcement, of just trying to provide some sort of safety mechanism. But if they would have done the right thing, provided long-term sustained solutions, we wouldn't be here right now.
Well, can I ask you about that safety mechanism though? So tell me, what is the value of having those officers there? Because they can't, you and I both know, they can't police the entire network. It's just too big for that many people.
Right.
So what do they do?
I think it's to show that there's a presence there, to have a sense of deterrence.
We're seeing officers on, in, and along the transit line.
Hello.
They arrive at a station, ride the subway, get out at a stop on patrol.
But at the same time, why not inject that money and resources that you're putting into this show of a presence to have issues addressed, such as the underhoused and mental illness and a number of other things?
Right, so you're saying the answer isn't even more police officers. It's not that 80 is too few and you want more. You're thinking an altogether different solution is called for?
Well, I think it's a comprehensive sort of way to address this problem. It's a complex problem being dealt with, and injecting 80 officers or a number of TPS in there, it helps the situation to be addressed in the short term. But as I'm saying that, let's help the problem long term. Let's try to have the people that are in the system that might be needing resources, housing, shelter, mental illness, attention, healthcare, get these things dealt with so that people are not using the transit system as a shelter system.
Right now, for instance, the city only has 142 warming center spaces across the city, but according to their own data, we know that there is at least about 700 or 800 people who sleep outside every night. Shelters are full, so the reality is we're seeing people with no options are just sort of finding respites where they can. TTC, coffee shops, the hospital emergency department, those are all places where people are now counting on as drop-in centers and shelters, but they're not equipped to be those spaces. And so we really need a real investment into these social services. And at the end of the day, we need affordable housing.
That's what we're asking all three levels of government to get involved, help prevent these things from happening, rather than having policing to address these problems as they're occurring.
Can you tell me a little bit more about those potential solutions? So what are the things that you see being done or that you hope would be done that would help address some of those problems?
Well, when you have people living full-time in the system, it's something that needs to be addressed. When you have people that are literally in the station all night long, all day long, and then at night, if and when they're actually addressed, they're, people jumping on a night bus and then riding the system for 3 or 4 hours, and then just jumping back into the system when the station opens up again, is something that needs to be addressed. We want these people to get the dignity and respect in order to get out of the system. Nobody wants to harm somebody that's underhoused. Nobody wants people underhoused to be disrespected. So let's give the resources necessary to help them out of the system.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
So what do you think about the idea that, Toronto police are going to be patrolling the subway? What are your thoughts on that?
I like that. It's protecting the people. I come from New York where crime is all over the place, in the streets, in the subways, and I don't feel protected in my city. So the fact that they're doing for this city, it's amazing. So we need to appreciate it.
So I really don't think that policing is the answer. I think that makes commuters very anxious, especially like Black and racialized commuters.
Hey, welcome back to About That. So, if you're trying to figure out just how effective it might be to have 80 additional police officers patrolling the network, you sort of have to weigh the cost of the solution against just how bad you think the problem is that you're trying to solve, against just how effective you think that solution might be in solving that problem. So as far as the cost goes, 80 additional officers, all on overtime pay, by the way, that easily works out to thousands of dollars a day, potentially hundreds of thousands per week. As for the scale of the problem, it is absolutely serious. We know this. Statistically infrequent, maybe, but if people just don't feel safe when they're traveling, that is in and of itself a problem, right? That's important. Finally, can police solve this problem? They can't be everywhere at once, but even if they are at the right place at the right time, are they the right people to solve the kinds of problems we see, like poverty or homelessness or mental illness or drug addiction? All parties involved say that they will be constantly evaluating and re-evaluating the plan as time goes on to see if it works and whether it's worth it. Thanks for joining us. You've been watching About That.